no insect in my farm has ever seen a carrot flower in their lives. Like they're wondering, like, what the hell is this, right? So I started doing like hand pollination, getting the best flowers and rubbing them, and really making sure like the experiment I was gonna give it like my maximum effort for everything to go well. Just when I kind of gave up on pollinators, they just like.
Welcome to episode 18 of the Seed Farmer Podcast. I'm Dan Brisebois, seed grower at Tournesol Cooperative Farm and spreadsheet and crop planning enthusiast. With the Seed Farmer Podcast, I want you to get inspired to go out and grow some seed on your farm. Gabriel Bravo is this episode's guest. Gabriel is one of the founders of the company Semillas Plantae and farms with Mima Picado at El Tablazo Farm in Costa Rica. In this episode, Gabriel talks about how Semillas Plantae is structured with 4 partners who operate the seed company and how they distribute their seeds. Gabriel explains how they source seeds from outside of Costa Rica and trial them to see what can grow in their bioregion, and how he is always on the hunt for Costa Rican heirloom varieties and the stories that come with them. We also discuss what it is like growing seed in the tropics, where there is a very humid season that is a nightmare for growing dry-seeded crops, and a dry season that is much better suited for seed production. We then have a more technical seed growing conversation about growing cilantro for seed and producing seed for biennials such as carrots in a climate with no cold winter to help with vernalisation. I hope you enjoy the conversation. Before we start the show, let's get a word from the Seed Farmer show sponsors. The goal of the Culinary Breeding Network is to improve communication between plant breeders, seed growers, farmers, chefs, produce buyers, and others to improve quality in vegetables, fruits, and grains. The Culinary Breeding Network creates unique opportunities to taste in development cultivars where everyone can share opinions and be a participant in variety development. Inviting chefs, farmers, and everyday eaters into the breeding process increases public awareness and understanding of organic plant breeding. To learn more about the Culinary Breeding Network and find out about upcoming events, visit www.culinarybreedingnetwork.com and follow on Instagram. Are you a farmer looking for educational resources in Canada? Check out Young Agrarians. They are a farmer-to-farmer educational resource network for new and young ecological, organic, and regenerative farmers. Young Agrarians offers farmer-to-farmer programming, including tools and training around farming, business, mentorships, land access, and so much more. Interested in learning more? Head to youngagrarians.org and give Young Agrarians a follow on social media. All right, back to the show. Gabriel Bravo, welcome to the Seed Farmer Podcast.
Thank you, Dan. I'm so happy to do this with you. And also because we've met personally so recently. So, it's a pleasure to be here with you and to do this podcast.
Well, thanks so much for coming on. Why don't we just jump in and you can tell the listeners a bit about your seed company and your farm and kind of introduce who you are before we get into more seed conversation.
Thank you, Dan. Yeah, well, we have a seed company. I'm a Costa Rican seed farmer. It's a pioneering company in Costa Rica. So we're the first ones to do this kind of like heirloom, open pollinated kind of conceptualized company in the country. Costa Rica, it's a small Latin American, Central American country. We're right in the center of the continent. We border on the north with Nicaragua and the south with Panama. We have quite a history. Me and my wife have had a farm, which is called El Tablazo Farm, for over 12 years now. And we've been involved in seeds since the start of the farm, since the beginning. But it was more like having this small seed bank in a corner of the farm, trying out this different Creole varieties of Costa Rican communities, and just having like a little bit of trial and error and experimenting how to save seeds and how to trial different varieties. But we were vegetable farmers back then. We started the farm really with vegetable farmings and CSA programs and farmers markets. But the seed project itself, it got way more intense around 7 years ago that we've had the company for. 4 years approximately that we're very now like exclusively growing seed on the farm. So right now we're especially dedicated seed farm for at least 4 years, but we've had experience with seed farming for over 10 years, I would say, but exclusively for 4 years now. The seed company started, as I told you, 7 years ago, and it's four associates in the company right now. It's the original founder. So it's me, my wife, Mima, and two other colleague friends. One friend is Felicia. She has a farm in the north region of the country, around like maybe 60 kilometers away from the Central Valley North. And the other colleague is in the Central Pacific in a place called Orotina. His name is Diego. And we're the original founders of the company. We're colleagues, organic farmer colleagues. And we decided to start this adventure together. We never really knew what it was going to become. I think right now it's a project that is going quite strong. We're very proud of the work that we've been doing. It's been a lot of trial and error, starting from scratch. We all started out like putting, I don't know, like $100 each from our pockets to start the company. So it really started from scratch. Right now, we're a company that we're selling over small still, but we're growing and we're learning a lot. We're selling probably between 30 or 40,000 packs a year. It's been a journey. It's been an adventure. So I don't know. Let's talk about it. We'll go deep into other subjects, but that's more or less the context of the whole project.
So you were saying that there's not a lot of small Costa Rican seed companies like yours.
Not really. You know, Costa Rica is a country that is really dependent on imported seeds. That's even for vegetable national production or for flower production. There's a lot of exports for flower production. The home gardening whole market thing is growing. It's been growing a lot since COVID. And there is an established like home gardener market, like small pack seeds kind of thing going, but it's mainly importers. You know, they're bringing the seeds from other parts of the world, from Canada or the States or Taiwan or Netherlands. And usually it's an importer. They work directly with the big company, a multinational company that already has the packs, or they bring like the raw seed, for example, like bulk seed, and then they package it here and they distribute it. So this is typically what you would get in supermarkets or hardware stores or gardening stores, all these kind of things. But this was the market that was established for home gardeners. Mostly like even a lot of them don't even say the varieties that are inside. The legislation for seed control is very, to put it lightly, very mild in Costa Rica. You know, it's still we have a very old law that regulates kind of seed commercial processes and procedures, which is back from the 1970s, that hasn't been like renewed. So there's a lot of holes in the law, what you can, you cannot do. So we started sort of competing with this kind of market, but we really started like a whole new movement, you know, which is something we're very proud of, because there was nothing like focused really on open pollinated heirlooms, educating people really about what biodiversity or agro biodiversity really means. So we've been breaking ground and we've been having like incredible reception from the market. We've never thought like project could get to the stage that it is right now. So we're super happy of educating the country and educating our market and our audience, like constantly getting feedback and growing. You know, we're trying to grow every year the catalog, but then you will know the logistics of growing a seed company, of keeping inventory, of keeping diversity, so we're learning a lot of stuff.
So the seed that folks are growing in Costa Rica in their home gardens, it sounds like they're coming from elsewhere. I'm guessing that they might not be trialed necessarily in a Costa Rican environment, or maybe they are. My question is, do your seeds have an advantage being grown at home rather than stuff being brought from far away in how they perform?
I think definitely they are. I think it's one of the main advantages that we have in seed quality and the crop production itself, right? And that's one of the things we specifically point out to our customers and people who are growing our seeds, like, hey, they're not only grown in Costa Rica, but they're trialed here for several generations in our farms with these conditions, with this altitude. So it's something that that the market didn't have. We were always importing the seeds, which were usually trialed somewhere else, not in tropical conditions. And we see it happening like in real time. We're getting real time feedback from customers saying like the seeds are doing so well. Thank you so much for doing this work. This was something that was missing. So we're getting all this feedback and all these comments of just the success of the whole crops and the whole growing procedures that people are having that make us feel that we're doing a good job. And it really reflects on the quality of the crops and on the way they resist, and also having like the technical background to say to people like, hey, I've tried it out in these conditions and I know it's for real that it's working under these conditions. It may be wind, it may be super dry, it may be high altitude, it may be cold, it may be very rainy resistant. And we have to like rain in the tropics is like a whole nother level, right? We're talking about when it's the rainy season, like get ready for it because it's hard. We have all year round production, which is like a kind of double-edged sword. I was discussing this with several like North American gardeners and colleagues, right? Like, oh, I don't know if I could do what you guys do, like grow all year round in the tropics. And like, I love the winter time because it gives me like a little step down. Like I'm going to reflect, I'm going to plan, so in the rainy season here in Costa Rica and in a lot of tropical countries, like the growing conditions sometimes get harsh. The humidity levels are huge. You're always fighting with a lot of bacterial and fungal infections. Even if you're growing like in protected environments like hoop houses or greenhouses, like you're still having these huge humidity levels that you have to struggle with and really like do a lot of technical work to get the crops going, right? So all these kind of things, also we have like very technical background to tell people like, okay, this is good for this region or for this season. And we're still working it out. We're still figuring it out. A lot of crops that I grow in my elevation, our farm is 1,500 meters above sea level. So it's like a mid elevation kind of mountain area in the country, which is not hot, but it's not also like super cool because we get elevations for over 2,800, 3,000 meters above sea level that gets way cooler, So we're at a mid elevation that a lot of vegetables do very well. So sometimes people ask like, oh, like you're offering this corn, for example, and we are growing this corn in this mid elevation farm. And they're saying like, oh, does it do well at, I don't know, 10 meters above sea level? So we haven't tested it out, but then we get a lot of feedback from customers or people growing it and say like, I cannot tell you for sure, but in the tropical region is way more adaptable, and corn is very adaptable in itself. So, we tell them, try it out, or we give it to other colleague farmers. So try it out in other climates, in other regions, in other types of soils, drier, cooler. We're getting these questions constantly and we try to do it ourselves, like sharing the seed with other farmers, with other colleagues and getting feedback or from the customers themselves. And we've gotten a lot of positive responses, like it always makes me very happy to hear how a variety that I've been growing in the farm is doing at a very low and hot weather in the coast, right? Or how it's doing in a very cool weather, 2,800 meters above sea level. And we're getting great results and we're getting a lot of nice feedback. So it's a constant construction of technical knowledge that it takes like a group of people to figure it out, right?
It sounds great to have that network that gives you feedback pretty closely about how the crops are doing. And great to have that relationship with the customers where they can tell you how excited they are and what can be improved. And so that's really great. I'm curious about the seeds that you offer. Where did they come from? So I know that you grow Costa Rican heirlooms in addition to a broad range of crops. So how do you choose what you're going to grow? And do you do a lot of work to select or maintain the varieties or improve them?
Yeah, I think this is a great question, and it's something that I'm always analyzing constantly. Right now, we have a catalog of over maybe 120, 130 varieties, and it's been a constant trial and error, a constant experimentation in the farms. And we source a lot of our seeds from a lot of different places, like even from North American companies. We did a lot starting out, but that's always something that's on my mind, right? Because you say or we're thinking that we're sourcing seeds from somewhere specifically, but really like even the catalogs that you guys have in Canada or the North or the US, like a lot of seeds have a very interesting context of coming from somewhere else in the world. It's just that I think North American home gardening culture and seed companies that you guys have over there that have created the education process of the diversity of seeds that there is out there. But originally, they're really from a lot of different places rather than from North America itself, right? Like
Definitely.
if you really think about it, like the amount of agrodiversity that North America gave to the world is quite scarce, you know, like, but you guys made it very interesting so that ironically, one of the best seed saving culture and one of the best seed saving projects in the world are now based in North America. So we source a lot of seeds from US companies, uh, a lot of different things. But I've also sourced seeds from everywhere. Like I'm not focused always trying to get seeds from especially only like the big seed companies or medium or small seed companies. I do a lot of work in local recollection on Costa Rican heirlooms, especially in varieties of beans, squashes, corns, the typical three sister system, right? That Mesoamerican is so famous for. But there's also interesting crops like sweet peppers or Creole cucumbers, some that I can think of from the top of my head. And then I've also sourced seeds from, or other friends have sourced seeds from Nicaragua or other Central American countries or Mexico. Or we've had a lot of we have an important volunteer program in the farm. And throughout the years, we've received hundreds of people. And we've even sourced seeds from them that they bring and we trial. And so I'm really like focused on sourcing seeds from everywhere. Like I went to Ecuador maybe a couple of years ago and I sourced seeds from markets from there. So I really believe like just the diversity it's everywhere. You know? And from wherever we can get seeds and see some interesting, important genetic, cultural, agronomic value to it, like it's important to try it out. But the same, like a good example is like the first time we went to the US and went to like learn to, we toured a lot, different seed projects and seed farms because being a pioneering company in a country like ours, like, and starting from scratch and not having like reference specifically on the work that we're doing, we had to go and, and really like get feedback and a lot of know-hows and knowledge to people that were doing it for over 30 or 40 years, right? And that's the US and that's Canada and that's the reality of the market and business. So we went there and got to know a lot of seed farmers, a lot of interesting companies, a lot of processes. And that's how really like you and I got acquainted, right? Like reaching out and having questions. And I appreciate it so much with you, especially of how open you are and how warm you are to share your experiences and stuff like that. But so the whole thing, what I was going to also, the second part of your question, when we source seeds, for example, last time we went there, like maybe if I brought 80 different varieties of seeds, I would say at least 50 or 60% of the seeds that we trialed out in the farm just didn't work. You know, we have a filter and we have trial gardens and trial fields. Like we need resistance, we need productivity, we need, also like, we look for also like cultural value and also like even like beauty of the fruit, taste, flavor, a lot of different filters that if we don't see them like showing off in the first generation or the second generation, if the plants are very vulnerable to diseases, if I'm not getting like the right productivity or the desired productivity, if I don't have this very strong qualities that we're looking for, really like if they don't pass that first filter, like we just kind of like let go, and say like, okay, so 50% of the varieties we're trialing are doing well. They're adapting well. That's the kind of crops we also want to propagate. And that's the kind of crops we want to really put out there and make people get to know them and feel comfortable with the almost like the breeding work or the technical work of saying like, this is something that has very high chances or probabilities of doing well in your conditions in your garden, right? So we're also like trying to choose the best genetics of all the crops that we're trialing out.
You don't want to waste time with stuff that doesn't do well. So you kind of grow a bunch of stuff, and then the best of that is what you're working with next, and seeing how it adapts and how people like it. If they like it, I hope they do. For the Costa Rican varieties that you work with, how do you find them? Are they readily available? Are farmers and growers still growing them and keeping their own seed year after year? Or is it something like that's happening in a lot of other parts in the world where those varieties are kind of disappearing as people lose some of that knowledge?
I think the seed saving culture in Costa Rica, it's in decline. It's more related to old time farmers or old school farmers that maybe they're in their 60s, their 70s, maybe even their 80s. You don't see really like seed saving culture like in younger generations or younger farmers, like really vegetable farmers or market farmers or even home gardeners that they were very used to like buying these imported seeds and just growing a little garden. And then really people are not into seed saving, right? So, sourcing the seeds, I think there's a lot of beautiful stories behind them, and a lot of them happen very naturally or even magically, I would say. For example, I'll try and think of several examples. I have a friend, a woman friend that she lives nearby here, maybe like 30 minutes up in a more rural town. I'm quite rural here, but I'm like on the urban fringe kind of margin where I'm very close to the city, to the central city. But then south from here, there's a lot of rural communities still. A lot of people growing like Creole varieties of corn, Creole varieties of beans. This woman friend, she's one of the dying, uh, characters of the rural imaginary that still knows how to do nixtamalized corn tortillas, for example. So, nixtamalized corn is when you cook the corn in an alkaline, uh, substrate or water. For example, you add limestone or wood ash and you cook the corn, the dried corn, to like make the peel or the outer layer of the corn come up easily. And then you grind this to make masa. You make like tortillas in the very traditional way rural and indigenous communities used to cook corn, right? So This woman is the one that makes all the tortillas for us. Like we have all the harvests from the farm and we take the corn to her and she does all the tortillas for us and then we buy it from her. And because it's time consuming and it's very technical and you have to do it right. So she's a master at it. But she's a jewel. She's a gem, right? Every time I go to her house, her husband is not a farmer's. It's not a market farmer or anything like that. Like, but he's a farmer in which is very engraved in his culture. He farms a lot for self-consumption and for the fun of it and for keeping himself occupied. And he's not even that old. I think he's maybe in his late 50s, maybe. And every time I go to their house, there's something hanging in the corridor that's new. Every time I go. So I said, his name is Alvaro, the husband. So, oh, Alvaro, like, what's this kind of corn? And then I saw this beautiful colored corn and which I've never seen before. And it's not normal to see colored corn in Costa Rica, like, like pink or purplish or orange kind of kernels. Oh, well, like you're growing this corn. Yeah, I've been growing it for a few years. This old guy introduced it in the community like 10 years ago. It became very famous in the local festivities because a great corn, to do a special kind of dish and so on. And he starts with the whole history and I said like, what's this thing doing hidden in this community right here? So I asked for some seeds or I exchanged some seeds with him. I trialed the corn in the farm. It does very well. It goes, and now it's in the catalog, for example. And then like very magical stories happen where I'm giving a small conference with the agriculture ministry in rural communities. That's one of the works I do. I go throughout like different communities and trying to spread the word and the gospel about seed saving and seed diversity and genetics and the importance of conserving the seeds. And there's a part of the presentation with this corn. And then a guy stands up and says like, oh, I know this corn. I'm from this region. And it clicked like the original guy said like, oh yeah, originally they gave me from this town and this guy was from that town. So I said like, the story has to be true, right? And then he tells me a lot more information about corn. So he says like, that corn was brought by a family member that went to Mexico like 15 years ago. He got a handful of a market, brought it to Costa Rica, and it then became like more like a Creole thing in that community. So all the seeds have a story. Then I go another day and in the corridor, he has another seed, this very beautiful black little bean. It says like, oh yeah, I've been growing this bean for several years in the family, blah, blah, blah. And then I come and I try it out and then I sell it as a Creole bean in the catalog, for example. And he always has stories and beans like that or seeds like that. Or for example, another one that I can think of, my wife is her family is from a very rural context in a northern little town called San Ramon from Costa Rica. And there's a big culture in sugarcane there. They have like this very old fashioned sugarcane, process kind of factories where they do it. They do it very old school techniques and where they pull out the liquid of the sugarcane and they boil it in this big, huge pots. And then they let it like simmer to get the thickness of the sugar and all of this. And one day my mother-in-law was there and the owners of the factory were having like this beautiful squashes they were breaking in half and they were dipping them in the sugar piles when they were cooking and then they pulled them out and ate them straight like cooking sugar, for example.
That sounds delicious.
It is. But then the story is like, oh, my daughter and his husband and some friends have this company of seeds. Like, what's this variety of seeds? And they start going with the varieties and like, oh, we've been growing this for this many years. It's very special for this recipe that we're doing in the factory because it has the right texture to hold the sugar in the meat and so on and so on. So that's another story of how we got seeds of the Creole squash variety that is very beautiful, has this incredible culture behind it, its incredible culinary purposes for it. And now it's one of the most popular squashes in the catalog, for example. So, and I could go on with many other varieties, but that's more or less like how things happen where we're trying to like rescue these things and how they come to our hands.
I love that, just that back and forth between discovering something and then meeting people who already know it and getting that information back. And I just love that dance between that you're explaining. That's fantastic. One of the things that I find really interesting speaking with you about your seed growing that's so different than mine is the climate. And you've already talked about how growing vegetables in a tropical environment is different than it might be in a temperate environment like we are in. I'm really curious how growing in a tropical environment influences growing seed. Like, what are the pros and the cons, and like, what are the things you have to navigate to get a good seed crop?
Sure, that's one thing I'm always discussing with my northern friends, and you and I had this discussion at your place, and I think it's completely two worlds apart, but there's a lot of similarities as well. I think high humidity levels or high rainy levels or kind of conditions, are seed production worst enemy, right? So in a country like ours, we have two very defined seasons. Okay, we have the dry season and we have the rainy season. Okay, so the dry season extends for 6 months and the rainy season extends for another 6 months. So it's half and half.
What months are the dry season and the wet season?
Yeah, the dry season starts in December, usually. We get the winds from the Caribbean Sea that really move away all the moisture and it gets very windy. And that's like the first indicator of the transition to the dry season. And it extends all the way to April, beginning of May. And then the rainy season usually starts May, ending May, and it ends in November. But usually the first months of the rainy season, the rains are a little bit more gradual or soft. This year was super different. The climate has been behaving so strangely, but we've got one of the rainiest Junes I've ever seen in my farming experience. And then it's been very dry, so it's been kind of funky. But usually it's more of a golden rule. September, October, and November are the rainiest months of the whole season. And when I mean rainy, it's rain. Like you get this very clear skies in the morning and immediately starts getting cloudy. And then after 12 or 1 p.m., you get this very heavy rainfalls, right? Like heavy, like these raindrops are super damaging to the leaf structures. The whole splatting in the soil and the bouncing, the soil and the leaves and the stems and propagating like the right conditions for bacteria and fungus and all these kind of things. Like it's super hard to produce outdoors in these conditions. There's several specific crops that do very well in these conditions. That's the one I'm focusing right now. When it's this seasons, for example, Creole varieties of corn are very resistant to these conditions, and then squashes as well. But then like no way I'm dreaming of doing peppers or tomatoes or cucumbers or a lot of different stuff. That no way. I would have to have hoop houses or greenhouses to try and have a bit more controlled environment. But still, the humidity levels are so high that even for producing sunflowers, like if I had them under hoop houses or greenhouses and it's the peak of the rainy season, just the moisture level is so high that just the heads start rotting out. There's all this mold in the seeds. So really we're focusing now on trying to get ready to harvest our peak production on April. So we get everything ready so that everything is in the ground and in the fields by December, late November. We have irrigation systems, drip lines or sprinklers, and we use a lot of uh, dripping systems, right? They're way better for keeping the humidity in the soil and not like, I don't like the sprinklers that much. They also like create a whole nother level of problem. So, we start in December, and so we can really plan it out that our peak production is on the peak of the dry season. Because when it's dry. Like we get both extremes, right? So, we have a deciduous forest ecosystem in the North Pacific that it's one of the, I think it's a perfect example of both sides of the coin of how dramatic the change is. Because when it's April, the peak of the dry season in this forest, everything is brown. All the trees lose their leaves. All the creeks and rivers are completely dried out. Everything is dust, right? And if you go there at the same forest in November, in the peak of the rainy season, it's like this lush, impenetrable rainforest with rivers flowing and with canopies and dozzles. And so that's kind of how it is. And I'm in a climate where I'm very Pacific influenced. So it gets very dry. So in April, I'm always planning that all the seed production is going to happen around between February and April, mm, not more than a May. You know, I've had these problems where I've had like planning problems where it extends a bit too much, and then I get the first rains, and then I get a lot of problems with the harvesting and the production and all. Like really, like when you become a seed farmer, just you know how bad humidity is for you, right? You just like you're always struggling with it. It's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. So I'm really trying to reduce this nightmare and with just making everything happen in the peak of the dry season. And when it happens, it's so magical. Everything goes so smoothly. The harvests are incredible. The conditions are amazing. So we're still, experimenting a lot and trying a lot. So, but then I have several greenhouses in the farm. So I take advantage of the first months of the rainy season, which are maybe May, June, July, where it rains, but the humidity levels are not so high. So I do, and I take advantage of that little window that I have there to do a lot of to finish off a lot of the production in the greenhouses.
It's interesting how you have your wet season, which is kind of like month wise, I guess, is our summer. And then, which is when we're doing most of our growing, that's when you have a lot of challenges. And in the winter, when it's dry, like for us, I mean, we have 2 feet of snow at that point and it's cold. So we couldn't grow seed then. But even if we could, the days are so short that things don't grow. So your day length is the day length doesn't seem to be a big problem for you in the tropics, just because the days and nights are more close in length. Is that right?
Yeah, completely. That's one of the main advantages that we have as growers for sure. Our day lengths really don't vary that much. We're quite near from the equator line. So, it varies, I would say 20 or 40 minutes tops throughout the year, right? So one part of the year, it may be, I don't know, sunrise would be at 5:30, 5:45 a.m. Then another part of the year, sunrise would be maybe like at 6 a.m. or 5:50. And then at the same in the afternoon, maybe sunset, maybe 5:45, 5:30, or 6 p.m. So it really doesn't vary that much. In my conditions, especially, I'm surrounded by several big mountains and big hills that, depending on the time of the year and the position of the tilt of the earth, right? Like I get more shade in certain fields, or I get more sun in certain fields. I already know my farm very well in that sense. So I know, like, for example, okay, it's December. I know this field will get this amount of shade. And I know then the field down there is going to get the sun that the one up here doesn't get for this part of the year. So I kind of have it figured out. So but I get very good sun exposures for at least 8 or 10 hours sunlight exposures in a lot of fields of the farm. So usually this is very constant throughout the year, which is a huge advantage.
One thing that occurs to me as we're talking, I don't think we said the name of your seed company. So you're Semillas Plantae, and your farm is one of the farms that. So you both have the farm and you have the seed company. What percent of the seed that you're distributing do you grow on your farm?
Well, as I told you, it's 4 associates that we started out the farm. So each associate has a farm that initially started producing for the company. I'm always telling myself, and we do a lot of educational tours in the farm, and I'm, I think one of the most important things that I did was learning how to separate myself from being a seed farmer and being, in my personal case, like the general manager of the seed company, or my wife being the in charge of the accounting department, or my older colleague being in charge of the customer service and ordering department, and so on and so on. But I really had to differentiate myself because there was a very fine line. There was a lot of blur, very blurry between what both roles were, right? So my farm with my wife is called El Tablazo Farm. And right now, our specific farm would say it's producing around, I would dare say around 40 or 50% of the catalog of the company. So it's quite a bit, right? And then the older colleague may be producing, I don't know, around maybe 30%. And this last year, we did our first trial and our first experiment on subcontracting seed farmers and developing the contracts and saying which varieties needed to be grown. But it's the first year that we really do it in 7 years. And it's a step that we have to go deeper and make it stronger and do a lot more practice and experimenting because we need it, right? Because a farm like ours, it's becoming very hard to be the main seed farmers as well as trying to get the seed company going at the same time. You know, like these two jobs are so different from one another, but so demanding in so many different ways that we have to, I think the word is delegate, you know, and I think the word is trying to really make things uh, assemble in the most efficient and practical and pragmatic way possible. So it's good because all the colleagues that started the whole project, we've gained a lot of technical experience and we've gained a lot of technical knowledge on how to do stuff, on how to clean the seeds, on how to dry them out, on 120 different varieties that we have real experience in the fields and farming on how to do them right. Like this is not overnight. So this knowledge is very valuable to now try and transmit it to other growers that are going to start working with the project. And that's the other thing, right? Like Costa Rica doesn't have uh, professional seed farmers just laying around in every corner. Like we have to take like people that are interested in the subject first, that have the very specific characteristics we're looking for, because you know it very well. And I know a lot of the audience that is listening to the show, like and seed farmers, like being a seed farmer is just like a whole different planet of being a vegetable farmer. So you need to really like transmit this to other farmers that want to start doing the growing and the technical aspect and how to harvest it, when to harvest it, when's the exact point, the maturing stages, the amount of plants that you have to have for this amount of space to get approximately this amount of grams of seeds that the company needs to buy, and so on and so on and so on, right? So it gets very complicated, but that's the puzzle that we're really like figuring out, and it's constant work, and we're just like really trying to like just I think it's a puzzle. That's the word. It's just a game. It's a game that you have to figure out where all the pieces go and make it better and more efficient every year.
Let's take a quick break and hear from our show sponsors. All right, everyone, important public service announcement. I know some of you are already making plans for how you'll spend the winter, ordering tools, researching seeds, projecting crops. It's also a great time to gather with our farmers to share knowledge and skills. This February, join thousands of farmers like you from across the U.S. for 3 days of community building and farmer-led learning at the 36th Annual Marble Seed Organic Farming Conference in La Crosse, Wisconsin. Find out more and register at marbleseed.org/conference.
Hello, everyone. This is Owen Taylor.
And this is Chris Bolden Newsom of True Love Seeds. We are farmers who run a seed company to preserve our ancestral plant relatives from all over the world and share our seeds with gardeners and farmers seeking out their beloved tastes of home.
We also have a podcast we think you will enjoy. It's called Seeds and Their People. We interview growers about the plants that keep their culture thriving.
Tune in wherever you listen to podcasts and at trueloveseeds.com.
All right, back to the show. I think now is probably a good time for us to pivot into talking more some of the technical part of the conversation. One of the crops that I thought we could talk about would be cilantro. It's a crop that the first time we chatted, you brought it up a couple times, and I definitely caught that my attention because we haven't had it on the podcast yet. And I'd love to go through what growing cilantro for seed is like on your farm.
Cilantro, I think I have a love-hate relationship with this crop. When I talk to farmers and friends, like we always relate ourselves a lot to the hate-love kind of concept in the good way, and why we really do what we do. You know, like being a farmer and doing farming, it's so hard, but at the same time so rewarding. And I think cilantro is one of those crops that just makes me like really feel this concept. And cilantro for us really is one of the most important crops. Like it's the best seller in the whole catalog. Like every time I analyze the numbers and what we need to grow, and like just like it's there like number one. It's always on the top, right? And that's for a good reason. Like Costa Rican culture, gastronomic culture, almost like circulates around cilantro. We use it for absolutely everything, you know? And so for home gardeners, it's the typical question all the time. Like when they don't know the company or like, oh, you sell seeds? Like first question ever, you have cilantro? You have cilantro? So growing cilantro, I think it's a crop that I don't always necessarily feel confident about. You know, like if you ask me about other crops, like I would say like, oh yeah, no problem. I feel super safe. I have a 90% chance that this is gonna go well, right? I've had terrible experiences with cilantro and incredible ones. And just to say maybe terrible one, like, I had this field maybe like 3 years ago that was supposed to be like the harvest for a 2 year period. Everything was going just too smooth. Like when you're seeing something and saying like, this is too good to be true. Like everything was so perfect, right? And, the way I do it, I'm a big pro seedling guy. I always do seedlings for absolutely everything, even for corn, you know, like some people like bully me about it. Like say like, why are you doing seedlings for corn? You know, and say like, I don't know. I like it. I think like I increase my chances. I increase my probabilities. But cilantro is one that I really love doing from seedlings. A lot of people do direct planting on the ground. But I love seedlings. What I do is I take this 50 cell kind of the trays They're quite deep and a little bit wide. And I do like little bundles, like I put maybe like 8 seeds or 10 seeds per little cell. And then I let it grow like in a little bundle. And that's how I transplant it to the ground. And I usually do it like every year. I'm going to say I'm going to do it a bit further away because then it becomes like a cilantro jungle where you cannot even go in, right? And this is also like a lot of technical things that I've been learning throughout the years, like the spacing out, like it really makes a difference when you're a seed farmer spacing out things. That's my perspective. Just getting inside, having enough room to do what you have to do, not letting the plants tangle between each other and like getting all twinkled up. And cilantro is a crop that does that. Like if you plant it too close, just the flower structures get tangled amongst them. And when they get the little seed pods, they get tangled. And if you have some weeds that are some maybe vining kind of weeds that maybe like go through the plant and then mix with the seeds. So I like to space it out. Maybe at least I would say 50 centimeters between each little bundle. Then it's very susceptible to heavy rains. Like it really like crushes the leaf structures, right? And it's very very vulnerable to fungal infections and bacterial infections. So I really try to put it in the ground when I know the dry season is really getting close. But then it's hard because it takes a while. It takes at least 5 months for the seed pods to be ready for the harvest time. So if I do it a little bit too late, then I'm risking of going into the rainy season. I'm getting the first rains when the pods are maturing. And once the pods are maturing and they get humidity, like it's done. It's done. Like really, like it could do maybe a couple of rains and then you're fine. And then you can try and do like harvest like between green and dry and then try to dry them somewhere else. Then it's more time consuming. Then it's more labor. And so this year that everything was going super smooth, like it had, I've never seen it happen that the rainy season started so early. Like it just became too early. Like usually April is like super dry. And I was getting this beautiful green pods like in early April. Like I'm saying, like this is going to be the harvest of cilantro and we're going to do super well. And I had a lot of expectations on the crop, not only because it's a very important economical crop for the project, also because it was going to be like a very nice stock that we're not going to have to think about it for a while, right? And then just this rains came like super early, like I'm talking about starting April when the whole thing was going perfect. And I'm not talking about mild rains or or a couple of rains. It started like dramatic shift 180 degrees rainy season rain, right? So I got desperate, I tried to hire like immediately a couple of guys, like try and do like, no, like if I leave it in the ground, it's going to get all ruined. And then we harvest the pods very green. We did the whole thing from the ground, like with root systems and soil. And then I hang them all upside down in the greenhouses, trying to like all the sugars of the plant, really trying to by gravity get them to go to the green pods and try to like extract as much nutrients as I could to finish like ripening the pods and all this kind of theoretical ideas I had of saving the harvest. And then like I had not enough room in the greenhouses. So I had to kind of like pack them a bit together. And this just created like perfect atmosphere of non-stop rains, high humidity levels. Just the whole thing started molding and molding and molding until just like it was completely destroyed. No way to rescue the harvest. Throwing everything to the compost, to the river. Like this experience, I think was one of the hardest I've had in my seed farming experience. And since that day, I've always been a bit scared, a bit fearful of the risks that cilantro, because even then I've tried other years to grow it like under hoop houses and plastic roofing. But still, like when you get this high humidity levels, like it just gets moldy so easy and so fast. And then you wish you had it like in the dry season just for time, for labor reasons, just to cut the whole thing, just like trash it into a barrel or something and get it like. But then if you're trying to save it from humidity and doing the manual labor of every day going and cutting the right flowers that are at the right stage between green and ripe and then putting them somewhere else and like just increases the production cost so much, you know? So, it's tricky and I'm always, reluctant, but also impressed, like I also get the other side of the coin. Last year, we had a decent harvest and I put them in the ground, beginning of November. And this cilantro field had like pouring rains, pouring tropical heavy, like hammer kind of drops of rain falling on it and falling on it and falling on it. And me going underneath the heavy rains, trying to like put some ground on and some mulching around them to save the plants and to try like, I really managed to rescue the plants and I was really impressed on how well they behaved to the heavy rainfalls until the dry season came and the first winds came and said like, it's going to happen. And we had a beautiful harvest. Like we couldn't do what was expected of the harvest. We had maybe like 60% of what we were supposed to produce, but still like it gave me like a bit of confidence again, right? It gave me a little bit like of a little hope there, but I'm still learning a lot, like, and we should, because it's such an important crop for us.
So those sound like some tough years or a tough harvest. That big one, that moldy one. I sympathize with you, and I'm glad you had a nicer one last year. Ideally, with the cilantro, you're letting it go to flower in the field, and then you want to get one cut to harvest it all. Like you mentioned, the extra labor of having to go in and get the individual umbels that have seeds on them.
Yeah, like the ideal situation would be like to let maybe 60% of the whole umbels like have dry pods on them, because you cannot leave them too much, right? If you have cilantro and you let the whole thing dry out in the umbels and the flower structure, like it's going to start to fall out. Like it falls easily, right? So what I've been doing this last year that I had a good harvest in the dry season and the rains didn't come early, I was letting like the whole thing, like I said, maybe 60%. When I saw it was kind of brownish and the rest were kind of greenish, I just took the whole plant out. I do a lot of this technique with a lot of different seeds, especially if the rainy season is coming or I'm having problems with a lot of things. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. That's a trial and error I'm doing with a lot of different crop species and varieties. But I've seen it works very well with cilantro, like just pulling the whole plant out and just letting it dry in a cool place, even in the sun, but maybe with a protected structure like a greenhouse or something. And once it's already kind of dry, like the whole pods, like the ones that were green, already start looking like a little bit brownish. Even they're not completely brown still. I've done the experiments and I just like always like try to cut the root end and the dirt end. So you don't want to mix soil with seeds. Like,
Never,
what a headache
never.
that is. No, it's such a headache. And, I've seen these machines that they do it with this magnet, and they do it with try to do it by polarity, but still like, what a headache. Right? So I'm extra careful when I'm doing this kind of processes. And then I just like, I really just shake the plant very vigorously into a 200 liter barrel. And then I just trash it out. I, I wind it, I blow it, and all the procedures, or all the normal procedures for cleaning out the seed. And I've always had very good germination rates, and very good seed quality at the end. So that's the way I do.
Well, thank you for walking us through cilantro, the joy and the sorrow of it. So another crop that we had talked about that I thought was interesting was how you worked with growing carrot seed in the tropics, because carrots are a biennial crop that need a cold vernalisation period. Do you want to walk us through what you like your carrot growing experience?
Sure, that's one of the little experiments we kind of like. It became kind of viral with our followers in the social media and the education processes that we do, because we're doing a lot of experimentation, especially in our farm, in El Tablazo Farm, of vernalisation, because being in the tropics and working with biennials, it's tricky, you know, like it's not like I can pull them out, put them in the cellar, or if I have mild winter, if I live in a very mild winter region, just leave it in the ground, put some mulch on top of it and wait next year for the flowers. Like, we have to start to experiment with fooling the plants. So, with these carrots, and I think it's important for us because there's a lot of crops that are biennials that people are really eager to see in our catalog, and they want to try them out in their home, in their gardens. And there's beets, and there's cabbages, and leeks, and onions, and so on and so on. So we've been experimenting a lot. The first trial, we trialed a variety called cosmic purple carrot. I brought it back home a while ago, around 5 years ago, and we brought it from High Mowing Seeds, if I'm not mistaken. And I was trying it out in the garden, and then I was reading about it and how to like do vernalization process, and I just dug out some of the best carrots, put them in a pot with some sandy soil, and just made room in the in the fridge around 5 Celsius degrees, constant 5 Celsius, 7 Celsius, like kind of mild, very mild winter conditions, and I just left it there, like fooling the plant, kind of pretending a northern winter, and I left it maybe for 3 months, maybe 4 months. Kind of indirect light coming in, put a little bit of water every now and then, maybe every 10 days or every 15 days. So just to keep the moisture there. And then I pulled it out, left it in the shade, maybe for 1 week or so, just like getting the plants to get used to like getting out of the fridge, like going to a more constant kind of atmosphere, and like I didn't put them in the ground directly. I gave them like this little adaptation kind of process. And then I put them directly on the ground. I planted the carrots again. When I put them in the fridge, I cut the tops off. So there was not a lot of leaves, right? Just like leave like a little bit of the newer leaves. And then I put them on the ground, and they started really like very fast. They started to produce the leaf structures again, and made me very happy. But I was still kind of skeptical. So like, is it going to flower? Is this really going to happen? And really, like, I think it was fast, 1 month, and the first flower structure really started to come out. And it was booming, like really, really started like growing super fast. And I think maybe in 2 months, I was having a very well developed flower structure. And when it was flowering, I noticed that there were no pollinators coming to the flowers, and I didn't see any insects. And all these theories started to like bounce in my head, saying like, like no insect in my farm has ever seen a carrot flower in their lives. Like they're wondering like, what the hell is this, right? So I started doing like hand pollination, getting the best flowers and rubbing them, and really making sure like the experiment I was gonna give it like my maximum effort for everything to go well. And just when I kind of gave up on pollinators, they just like one started coming and the other started coming. It's just like, I swear, like in a week, it was just like a festival of this amazing diversity that I've rarely seen, like very rarely seen, diversity of insects that were just like pollinating these flowers like crazy. And yeah, then the whole process went, the first flowers started to dry out. I was harvesting manually all the dry flowers and starting to experiment with the techniques like first time with carrots. So trying to experiment like if they fall off, how easily they fall off, like how can I mesh them? How can I blow them out because the seed is super light? And then we got this incredible harvest, like from, I would say it was like 25 square meters, like a very small experimental patch. Like we're still selling that seed right now. It's like I did the trials in the garden, having this beautiful carrots, second generation carrots. And so we're trying to experiment a bit more. Now I have an experiment with kale, a dwarf Siberian blue kale, I think. Did the same thing. They're in the fridge right now. 2 more months to go, putting them in the ground, maybe in November. So hopefully, if I get the flowers, the pods will be ready in the peak of the dry season. So we'll see. We'll see.
I wish you a lot of luck with the kale and for all the future biennials that you might do.
Surely, because it's a subject, right? Because as a seed company, you need to always be playing with what you want to do and what you should do, right? I think this is a game we're always playing, right? Because the market wants something, and then sometimes you want something completely different. So you have to play around with this kind of things, right? So kale was one of those things, and carrots the same. Like if it's going to be hard for us to grow them here in our conditions, like what's another option? Like we'll have to source our seeds from somewhere else and then just package it and then distribute it. Nothing wrong with that really, but we're really trying to make the project very unique in trying to source the seeds from our own farms or our own subcontracted farms, like really making sure that people are saying like, oh yeah, like this was trialed and grown here. This is something that makes you unique and makes you special and something that we're very proud of. So these processes, we really want to make them very, very technical and very successful for that reason, right?
All right. So I think I'm going to start wrapping us up with a few questions. So I guess the first question is, what do you wish your younger seed grower self knew that you could tell yourself now?
That's a tricky question. I think there's a lot of things my younger self will tell me right now, not only in seed farming, but in just having a farm in general. I think personally, I was very naive in a lot of senses, but not in the bad way. I think just I think being naive was an advantage, as an advantage of keeping the perseverance and keeping just keep going, like, because in farming, you're always having these moments where you're saying like, it's too much for me, like it's overwhelming and you're always feeling how to be in charge of this, I don't know, like octopus kind of creature that has all these legs that you have to keep in control and keep going. So, I would say planning and organization, it's so important, like I think we've always had a very well structured project, but when it comes to the fields and what you're growing and the planning, like I'm still, I wouldn't say struggle, but I'm still learning a lot on how to do it better every year. Like to make the projections, to really have very focused goals on what you have to produce, what amount you have to produce, how much space it's going to take, what are the varieties that you're going to do. So I think the planning would be something that I would tell my younger self, like, go way more deep on these subjects, right? And because now I see it, right? I would say patience is another thing. I always remember when we're starting out the farm. We've had the farm for over 12 years now, and personally, I've been farming for over 15 years. And I think when we started out the farm, we were invited to this little like investigation program that Costa Rican University was doing about agroecological small scale like integrated farms with very very experienced farmers, like maybe 20 or 30-year experienced farmers at least. And I was always asking them on the breaks, like, I've been 3 years into farming. I'm struggling a lot. Um, there's a lot of costs. The logistics of the production is super complicated, so on and so on. And this farmer told me, like, look, kid, in other words, like, it's going to take you, or it took me at least 15 years to get a very small sense of what do I have to do with my farm and how my farm really works. So 15 years into farming, I always remember his words because that's exactly how I feel right now. Like saying it took all these years to have a sense, more or less a more clear sense of what are the priorities, of what do I really have to do, and what are my goals to make this system as efficient and planned and organized as possible. And you start really mixing the whole romance of what we do with the reality of what we do. It's like if you don't manage to mix both of these ones, it's always going to be a romance. And when it's too much romance, I see, or I tend to see, that projects fail because it's too much to handle, and it's too much to say that there's nothing more beautiful, I would say, to mix your work and your livelihood and what you do for work and how you create economical means with doing something that goes along with your philosophical kind of perspective or view. But if you don't mix both and you go way too much on one of both scales, it's tricky. So this is something that I've learned now, and that maybe as a young farmer, I didn't have that clear.
Thanks for those words of wisdom. I think that's great. In a kind of a similar vein, what would you tell to other farmers that don't grow any of their own seed? What would you tell them to inspire them to grow or to keep some of their own seed from their own crops?
I think this is one of those important kind of side jobs that a project like ours is doing, and a lot of seed companies with our kind of concept do as well. We're always trying, and I always like the analogy, like we preach the seed gospel, right? Like not only to the seed not only to the home gardeners, but to the vegetable and farmers that go to markets and people who are really like doing it for the production of it, right? Because then you also have like the self-sustainable kind of like self-consumption homesteaders kind of gardens. In Costa Rica, this is very focused like on very old school 80-year-old farmers in very rural communities that they grow their corn for their production of the year to have their own tortillas and the clay ovens and the old ladies cooking corn for the whole year, right? But especially like for farmers that are doing it commercially, we're trying to do a lot of the education work. Like we're very focused on open pollinated and heirlooms and all of this. Like I know the production and the commercial market kind of thing. It's always very focused on the hybrids and this like super incredible, like producing varieties and the yields and all this kind of things. But I'm a true believer that we should diversify the productions, right? Like, nothing wrong with hybrids. I really never like had nothing against hybrids. I think they're great in many different ways, but I think there's also a lot of myths around them, like saying like, you're always going to get like superior yields with any kind of hybrid you do and all those kind of things. I think there's a lot of things that we could discuss in that matter, but I sense it more like in the way of creating or diversifying the markets. In Costa Rica, especially, I think worldwide, but we have a very standardized culture on what is grown for the farmers markets, right? I used to be a farmer market for many years. I did the whole thing, went every weekend. Uh, we managed to create a CSA company as well. We sold it recently to try and dedicate ourselves exclusively to the seed production, but I'm quite related to the whole thing. And I'm always preaching now with the seed company about diversity because Costa Rican vegetable culture is very standardized. Again, it's a worldwide thing, but specifically here, like if you go to the conventional farmers market or even to the organic farmers markets, you're always getting the same things, always getting the same kind of tomatoes, the same kind of cucumbers, the same kind of eggplants, the same kind of lettuces, you name it, right? So, I understand that the market is always looking for the commercial, characteristics, like the red, hard, round tomato that people are used to, right? But with our companies or our projects and preaching about agrodiversity, I'm always telling to the farmers when we do conferences with the company or visit like communities of farmers, like it could be a game changer if you guys start diversifying the offer that you have in your stands or your CSAs or your, like there's a lot of tomatoes, a lot of open pollinated tomatoes that do very well in growing conditions that have very special characteristics that no other farmer has out there, right? So you can start creating differentiated markets. You can start educating people about diversity. You can stop competing like ferociously with all the other farmers that are out there with exactly the same hybrids that you are growing. So I'm not saying 100% of the production, but let's say that 20% of your farm or your production is specialized on something completely new and something completely different that is going to be out there and there's going to be, and I think there's a demand for it. Like when I used to be a vegetable farmer and we had the stands, like we were famous in the market for it. Like some people say like, oh yeah, I'm coming here because someone told me that you guys are the weird farmers, right? You got like weird stuff right here or something like that, right? Not in the bad way, but saying like, I always corrected them, like, it's not weird. It's just different, right? And when they tried it or they have, I don't know, a blue tomato or the purple carrot or something very new to them or very different, and they tried it and they went back home, a lot of them were coming back next week saying like, you got more? No, I loved it. It was the best tomato I've had, and so on and so on and so on, right? So I think as farmers, we're very standardized and it's very hard to change our mindsets into trying new things. I think younger generation farmers are way more willing to do this kind of things. A bit more traditional farmers, maybe in their 50s, they've been doing it the same way for over 20 years or so. It's harder, but I think that's part of the work that we have to do. It's part of the work that we're doing. I have several examples. Like I went with a community of colleagues that are very traditional organic farmers with the same kind of vegetables all the time. And I just started like giving seeds away, giving a little conference of what agrodiversity means, the importance of recovering genetic resources, of trying new things, so on. And at the end, like we give them a lot of packs and so they can experiment and try out. I have this friend I gave him some eggplant, some Rosa Blanca eggplant seeds, incredible varieties, native from Italy, like 18th century eggplant, which is beautiful. It's rounded, kind of white lilac little balls, super sweet, kind of like incredible texture, like almost like a mushroom kind of thing, like very different from what people here are used to, like a hybrid, very dark skin colored eggplant that they have to put in salt water so that it's not bitter and so on and so on. People don't know this exists. Like he tried out the seeds in a little corner of the farm. Incredible plants, super rustic, extremely productive for a vegetable farmer, very disease resistant. It has a lot of very special characteristics to it, right? He took them to the market, and he doesn't even go to organic markets. He has like an organic stand in a conventional market, which makes him like a bit special, right? He took the eggplants. Everybody bought the eggplants. He had a great experience, so on and so on. 1 year later, he tells me the experience, but I told him, "Oh, so you saved seed? You grew some eggplants? What do you do?" So like, "No, that's the experience I had." And then, yeah, I didn't grow it anymore. That's it. Like 2 days in the market. That was it. It was gone. And he didn't repeat the experience. Not because he didn't want to or any other reason, just because they're so involved in what they're doing and what they've been doing for so long that the experience seemed interesting, but they're so focused on the production of everything else, I think so, that it just takes an extra push again to say like, hey, remember that experience you had? Like, exploit it, like make it better, create markets, save your own seed for some of the stuff you're doing. Like every time you're going and buying the hybrid seeds of tomatoes to the agro store, like you're paying hundreds of dollars for the production. That's going to mean also like if you have 20% of your farm with something special and you learn how to save seed in a practical, efficient way, you can be saving money as well. I think it's very powerful when you have a closed cycle of what you're producing. That's one of my main prides in my farm. Like 100% of the seed production in the farm comes 100% from the seed bag of the farm and 100% from the greenhouse that is specialized for the seedlings for those seeds. And I think this is very powerful, and I think it's something that farmers should have one way or another. We lose it completely when we're only dependent on buying the seedlings from someone else, on doing the harvest and starting the whole process again. And like, you're never connected to the whole cycle of the seedling, the seed, the plant, the flowers, the fruit, the seed, and then go and do it all over again. Right. So I think it's an important job and it's an important task, and we're definitely eager to keep promoting it. Right.
Well, I think that's a great invitation to leave this conversation on, to encourage people to embrace that diversity. Is there anything I should have asked you that I didn't ask you during this conversation?
I would just like to end maybe talking a little bit about the importance of a project like ours in a country like Costa Rica, right? I think it's quite special in some ways for me to be able to have this opportunity to expose our experience in a place other than the northern hemisphere, the northern area or the US or Canada, where all of these incredible seed projects and seed companies are located. Like there's a whole world down in Latin America that needs to be stronger, and I think needs to be out there. I think we're a pioneering project in many ways in the way that we are doing it. But there's also incredible projects in Argentina, in Chile, in Ecuador, in Mexico. And I think it's important to expose it. And I think it's also very crucial that we start working on protecting the biodiversity in these regions. Like you guys have very strong seed saving projects and incredible companies like protecting all the material that you already have there, like it's already been there for several decades or generations and, and, and just circling around. But like the work we are doing here, like all these Creole variety stories that I told you about, that's just like such a small portion of what's out there. And it's just so vulnerable. It's so vulnerable to being lost and to being just like, there's another important variety, for example, here in Costa Rica, that is a corn. I talked to you about it when we were at your place. It's a corn called Pujagua corn or Congo. It's very special from the North Pacific region of Costa Rica, and it's super vulnerable. Like it used to be such an important traditional crop. It's a purple kind of lilac corn that grows very well in this region. And it's very important for the culture of the people who live there, of the very old ladies that cook them in the clay ovens and the very old farmers. And, but there's no more interest for this kind of varieties, like if projects like ours don't intervene or other kind of entrepreneur projects or universities that do investigation programs to try and promote and conserve these varieties, like it's done, maybe their grandkids, they're not interested in farming anymore. And the seed is so vulnerable. Like it's amazing in my own experience. And I know a lot of seed savers have the same experiences of how easy it is to lose a variety of seed. Just like having one special crop that nobody else have and you don't have time for it. You put the dry seed on top of the fridge, forget about it. 3 days come later and they're gone because a mouse came, just like ate the whole thing. Like that's one very simple example of how vulnerable it is. But then also like there's no succession or there's no generational legacy of the carry on, right? So I think that's something important to mention, that we also have to like kind of like make this visible and promote it as well.
Thank you, Gabriel, for this great conversation. Where should people go to find out more about Semillas Plantae? Anything that you want to point them towards?
Yeah, sure. Well, we have the website, semillasplantae.com. So semillas like seeds in Spanish, and plantae like the kingdom plants, .com. We have an English version. We have a French version. So you guys can check it out. You can see it out. We've worked a lot on the platform. We have a blog section. We're really doing I'm very inspired by the educational work that guys like you do, or a lot of different people out there do, I think it's so important. So we've been trying to do it like an educational platform. We have a YouTube YouTube platform as well, Semillas Plantae. And yeah, we don't ship seeds, to the US or Canada. So, that's kind of a thing. But we're trying to ship to other Latin American countries. We're doing some experimentations right now, seeing how it works and stuff like that. But still, you guys can see the catalog, see the work that we do there. And you can write as well. My email, is Gabriel Bravo @semillasplantaya.com. If by any chance any of you guys come to Costa Rica, we can be in touch. And no, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And I'm very, very grateful for the whole experience, Dan. Thank you so much.
It's been a real pleasure having you here. And I'll put links to everything that you mentioned in the show notes so people can click on those to get to them also. So thanks, and have a great next step of your season.
Thank you, man. You too.
And that's episode 18 of the Seed Farmer Podcast. A huge thanks to Gabriel for being on the podcast. In the show notes, you can find links to find out more about Semillas Plantae. A huge thanks to Sophie Sedalton for the theme music. You can hear more of their music at sophiasedalton.com. And in fact, they just released a new single on Spotify. You should go and listen to it. And thank you so much for joining me in these conversations with seed farmers. You can find more seed growing resources on my blog at seedgrowers.farm. While you're there, you can subscribe to my newsletter full of seed growing, crop planting, and farm spreadsheets. You can also pre-order a copy of my upcoming book, The Seed Farmer, a complete guide to growing, using, and selling your own seed. The Seed Farmer podcast is produced in part by no-till growers with the hope of our sponsors. A huge thanks to everyone at no-till growers for making this podcast happen. If you haven't already subscribed to this podcast, now's the time. You wouldn't want to miss the next episode. Until then, happy farming.